Welcome to the second session of third course. Today we will be talking about the worldview's role in life, definition of worldview filter, the steps of cognition, comprehension, and understanding, the lack of cognition, comprehension, and understanding of universe. We're going to talk about the concept of Zalik al-Kitab. We're also going to talk about the lack of cognition, comprehension, and understanding of dipolar universe. We're going to talk about a notion and the importance of a reference in Quran in Al-Asr Surah. We're going to also talk about the definition of Amalus Salihat and the types of peace. We're going to talk about the types of opposition and the lack of cognition, comprehension, and understanding of being Saleh, which is an attribute that we will define and discuss. Before we start, as always, let's hear some reports or any questions before we start. Anyone would like to share or ask any question we ought to answer? And please confirm that you hear my voice.
Yeah, we can hear your voice.
Thank you.
Yes, we can hear.
Thank you so much. All right. Anyone have any question or anything to share before we start? Anyone? Okay. No questions? Just gonna give it few more seconds if anyone has any question. Also, if you can turn your video on, it would be nice. As we mentioned, we wanna keep that standard going so everyone else also follow. So please turn on your video unless you absolutely can't. Okay. Seems like there are no questions. So let's begin with the first discussion we're gonna have about the cognition, comprehension, and understanding. There are 3 steps in our current life, and those are the cognition, comprehension, and understanding. And in order for us to have a better understanding of each of these stages and how they are different, we're going to make some examples, and through these examples we try to understand what are the differences between these cognition, understanding, and understanding stages. So let's pick the concept of death for the example. When we are let's imagine that we actually don't know what death is and we never heard of it. And the concept of death happens, let's say, in a neighbor. Through this news, the death news of the neighbor, what happens is that we become introduced with the concept of death by hearing this news, which is the cognition level. The cognition of death happens on the first stage of being introduced with a new concept. So by just hearing the death news, we get to the cognition step. But after that, we start observing the reaction of people, how they react to this concept, and the implication of the notion. The individuals are no longer around, and also the consequences that we can observe as a result. It gets us to a next level, which is understanding. And that is basically by the exposure of some of the consequences of what happened and the circumstances present. But it is only possible to get to the understanding level if we actually experience it. So that means that we die. So the only way that someone can achieve an understanding stage is through direct experience of that notion. So in this life, one of the most sublime stages of between these stages is basically the stage of or the step of understanding, and the lowest step is the step of cognition. Um, One of the other notions that we can example is that throughout this life, we can get to the highest level of understanding of the notion of an al-haq, which is I am the truth or I am God, but not itself. Or we can have the understanding of the unity of existence, but not being unified with existence on its highest level. One of the important topics that Dr. Taheri talks about is that in the previous lives, which we talked about and established the understanding that it's not operating uh, similar to the earth. So when we talk about the previous life, we're not actually talking about the earth experience in a different form, but rather another life that has another or an extra dimension limiting the or causing neediness. And the particularity of that life would basically cause the experience starting with specific levels, and the highest or the most sublime stage in that would be cognition. So we begin this life from the cognition stage, and then we go through the life, through the experiences, we get to the understanding. Just like that, we went through stages to get to cognitions as the most sublime level in the past life. So then when we die and go to next life, we also gonna start our experience by the understanding. And then when we get to the end of it, we basically achieve the most sublime version of that and transform to a more higher stages. Now, let's talk about the lack of cognition, understanding, and understanding of the existence. And that leads our discussions to the notion of Zalik al-Kitab, which basically it's a part of the reference in Quran, Zalik al-Kitab la rayba fi hudan lil muttaqin, which basically means that it refers to a book. And when it refers to that, it uses a word that refers to that book, not this book. So the reason is that this difference is important because some individuals interpret this as a reference to Quran itself, and because it's actually referred to something further away, and it basically is that book, not is referring to a book that is further away, not particularly there. So the question is that what is the book that is being talked about? In the Erfan Halgheh perspective, that book is the book that contains the signs, all the apparent signs of existence. And when we talk about the apparent or clear book of existence, we are talking about this book that reveals all the secrets of universe in the forms of natural laws. And we know that humans throughout the history, from the beginning of creation, once the humans start walking on earth, we had access to this book. And the lack of cognition, understanding, and understanding of the material world would cause all sorts of problems that could be very fundamental and affecting the worldview of the human being. So the existence is just like a book that contains the natural laws and is supposed to teach human being what those natural laws are. And the lack of attention to these laws and to the content of this book can cause the non-harmonious operation and misalignment of individuals. And that can cause some significant and irreversible uh, mistakes and damages to the life. Now, God, throughout this book that contains all the secrets and signs and lessons um, of existence, it provided this to human beings so throughout his experience in life would be able to access this no matter what part of the world they're living or what part of the history they're living. The book is accessible to all in the same way. But the issue becomes who has the eyes or the depth to actually look into those signs and be able to understand and read this mysterious book of existence. So these laws basically would impact how we relate to life and how we would go about encountering circumstances of life in a different ways. And through those, our worldview would be programmed in a specific way. So this specific book that we're talking about or being referred to is the book that contains the evident secrets, divine secrets relating to the material world, that by reading through this book, we can understand the fundamental aspects and the basis of the existence and how we could correctly program our worldview in such a way that is harmonious and aligned with the natural laws. There's also another reference in Quran that it says that throughout the creation of heavens and earth, and through the process of formation of the day and night, there are signs for the ones who are thinkers. So it encourages deep thinking about the howness of the creation, the whyness of creation, and so on. So humans, in order for humans to achieve Kamal and sublimity, they need a guidance. And through this guidance, they're able to uh, go through this journey and then know how to go about uh, encountering certain scenarios and circumstances. And any factor that could help us and guides us through understanding and understanding of the natural laws and how we could relate it, whether those are plants and animals or enzymes or molecules or microorganisms, they are becoming part of the this book of existence that are there to guide us toward alignment with natural law and the harmony with existence. So, in order for the human being to move in the journey of Kamal toward God, all the equipments and facilities should be utilized. And one of these facilities and equipments that are there for us to use is this book of existence, that every part of it can have various lessons for us. So we could be more successful in the journey of Kamal and be in the journey of Kamal. There is a story that Dr. Taheri actually talks about, that he says that he was years ago, he was um, very depressed and very helpless, in a state of despair, goes for hiking, and with no particular destination, he kind of like wanders, and then he encounters a very big rock, and suddenly he uh, notices a strange phenomena, a very interesting phenomena, that from the heart of that giant rock um, there was a tiny plant that was growing, and it kind of gave him this impression that even in the heart of a rock, something can grow, and efflorescence. So every single thing that happens around us, even it might appear very simple, um, or it might be left unnoticed, have many lessons that it can teach us if we look deep into every single um, event or aspects that exists in the book of existence. Now, let's talk about a notion that we talked about before, but it's relevant to this discussion. So it helps us to understand and kind of link what we learned before to what we just discussed. If you remember, we discussed about the worldview filter and how all the external events and circumstances is being received through our five senses, through the brain's receptors, and after going through a framework that is responsible for doing the analysis, evaluating the intensity, weakness, or goodness, or uh, badness, or the intensity, and or the whether it's beauty or ugly, all this like different analysis that we do by that specific framework. Going through that analysis, then it can, based on that, it can cause individuals to have various feelings. Someone can feel fortunate, lucky, grateful, depressed, all those type of different feelings. But essentially what happens is that what is responsible for those feelings are this specific framework of worldview that filters all these external events in a particular way, and then give a specific conclusions with a specific charge that goes through the various stages that we discussed, and then it causes us the reaction. So we know that the external events and incidents, um, it goes through the worldview filter, and then after that we have the mind and psyche reaction, and then we have brain reaction, and that turns to chemical and neurological messages, and then that's a reaction of the body. So the way in which that we perceive external circumstances and incidents and events, um, and the way in which that the worldview is determining the intensity and the um, in the way in which that we relate to that, whether that's on a mind level or psyche level, which is an emotional level, it causes us to really have a different reactions. That could be um, about phenomena like death, birth, explosion, war, um, starvation, poverty, illness, and etc. And we established the understanding that the same physical phenomena perceived differently by different individuals, and no same physical event would have like same kind of reactions and same processes. So this uniqueness of the worldview causes unique reactions within the people. So each of these reactions can cause various different types of chemical and neurological responses that could basically cause reactions in a different ways, whether that's happiness, sadness, or all sorts of emotions that it can happen. So this filter is very important because it's pre-programmed, and based on that programming, it would evaluate the input of information and determine the intensity of that, and then basically give output that becomes our reactions. So it is extremely important for us how we program that filter, because when we encounter scenarios and incidents and events, it doesn't allow us to really think about what type of reaction we want to have. We just have a reaction as a result of this pre-programmed filter. So it becomes very important to be aware how we are programming this and how we are relating to that. Now, going back to uh, the lack of cognition, understanding, and understanding of the natural laws and the law of existence, if we are programmed or we programmed ourselves in a non-harmonious way, then our reactions um, in situations encountering a specific circumstances would be non-harmonious as well. In a way that, imagine if we programmed ourselves to have some sort of oppositions to rain. Every time that it rains, we feel depressed, or whenever it's cloudy, we feel um, um, kind of down. And these are basically the way in which that we programmed ourselves. And then by encountering that phenomena, we would have a specific reactions. So it's very important for us to understand the natural law, and by the understanding, align our worldview with those harmonious perspectives and worldviews. So when we encounter incidents and phenomena, then our reactions would not be non-harmonious, causing all sorts of tension within our body, and opposition to natural laws, causing all sorts of illnesses and disorders. So we know that in conventional science, they only look at the hormones and neurological and chemical imbalances within the body and how that corresponds with the illness. And they aim to kind of, if they observed imbalance, they try to bring back that balance by medication. But if we somehow have access to the root of those messages, which is coming from the worldview, then we are able to actually avoid causing those messages to affect us to begin with, and further having to, deal with the consequence of that. So if we can uh, eradicate the initial negative process, then we no longer need any further um, any further um, involvement with the process. So it is important to really understand the significance of this because usually we kind of deal with the symptoms instead of dealing with the root cause of the problem. And we are looking at the root cause of the problem always goes back to the worldview because if we can adjust the worldview in a way that it doesn't cause negative consequences, then you would not have any negative consequences. You would not have any negative imbalances within our body. So we realize that most of the issues that we have encountering certain scenarios, uh, we the issue comes from the um, lack of harmonious worldview. Someone had a mic open. If you can close it, I appreciate it. If unless you um, have a question, it's iPhone. I don't know. Um, yeah, if you can watch your mic, I appreciate it. I don't know whose iPhone is still the mic is open. If you don't mind closing the mic, thank you. All right. Um, so, and if someone can note this time, I appreciate it. We can come back to it, then cut it because for for the sake of video. So, worldview is like a lens that human beings have in front of their eyes, and the way in which that lens is set, they perceive as such. If this lens is blue, then they perceive everything with the shade of blue. If it's red, so on. So the way in which that we program this lens, we're gonna perceive external circumstances in accordance to how we programmed it. So again, worldview filter is a software that it causes the instantaneous reactions of human being in regards to the circumstances they're going through. So the way in which that we program that is extremely important because we can program it in a faulty way and then the result would be negatively impacting and it could be harmonious and then we see that that individual goes through the difficulties of life gracefully with no negative consequences or illnesses. So we understand that despite of, except the um, poisons, microorganisms, incidents, accidents, the environmental pollutions, etc., there are other factors that they could be detrimental for humans' health, and that is faulty programming of a worldviews. And in fact, the most of the issues, the significant portion of the humans issues come from the faulty worldview programming, and it is the programming's particular analysis that would cause detrimental reactions of the body as a result, causing all sorts of difficulties. And these type of illnesses that comes from a faulty programming of the mind, we call them mentosomatic illnesses. And we call it mentosomatic because it starts from the mind and then it becomes somatic, which is basically affecting the body. And one of the particularity of these type of illnesses is that it happens out of nowhere and it suddenly happens, whereas uh, the psychosomatic illnesses are actually gradually and throughout the passage of time, it becomes worse. But when it comes to the worldview issues, it's suddenly can cause it can suddenly cause a illness and disorder. So the human's worldview uh, has a reciprocal relationship with other layers of our existence. And as you remember, we said that the mind, psyche, and the physics have a reciprocal relationship, and any type of faulty worldview could cause a negative impact on the other aspects of our existence, and then disturb the integration of the various layers of existence as well as our mind, and that basically cause the mental somatic illnesses. Any questions before we go to the next topic? Okay. So the next topic we're going to talk about is the lack of cognition, understanding, and understanding of journey and destination. It is a very important topic because lack of understanding the notion can cause all sorts of issues throughout the life. And it can also cause the individuals to lose their precious time in life for not having this um, harmonious worldview integrated in their life. So we know that human beings are after specific goals at any given time, and in order for them to achieve that, they kind of picture a journey or they have a path to get to that destination or that goal. And the important question is that is it only the destination or the goal has the significance, or also the journey, or the journey does not have any significance? We can kind of examine this question by an example that imagine you want to go for a journey, and we know we have a set destination, and in order for us to get to that destination we want to use the best path and the best equipments or the best means to get there. Now, if that's the optimal goal in terms of getting to the destination, um, still the question remains that is it the goal only to get to the destination, or also, and does that mean that the journey doesn't have any value, or the journey also has some value? One of the examples that Dr. Taheri uses is that imagine you want to go to a different city. Let's say you need to take a bus for like 20 hours. And it's going to be difficult journey, 20 hours in a bus. And let's say it's night, so you can't see any, um, you can really enjoy the scenery. And imagine a person, a magician appears and says, ladies and gentlemen, I have an extraordinary ability that I can um, make this destination, I can make this so you can get to the destination in an instant, in a snap. Most of the people would want to avoid the tiresome journey of 20 hours in a bus and get to the destination right away. So it's very tempting for individuals to say like, yes, we would love to skip the 20 hours journey in the bus and just be there already. Now, if we really look into that, let's say people would get what they want with the snap they're there. Now, they need to basically make a decisions of where they want to go after. Now, imagine the magician appears again, say like, okay, what's your next destination? One might say like, well, I wish that my school is done, or my mortgage is done, my children's are graduated or married, or they have kids, their kids went to school. So there's all these like destinations or important parts in life. And imagine this magician could basically make a snap and you're there. And if someone um, keeps saying yes to the magician, they just basically skip to these snapshots of events. And if they insist and continue the snaps, then they just basically be standing on top of their grave uh, by basically skipping the whole entire journey. There's always going to be something that we want to get to and skip the journey. And by skipping that, we basically skipping a majority of a life. Because if you think about it, the journey, the destinations are basically almost 0 second. Because if you think about it, imagine the first snap you got to the city in the bus. At what point can you say that you arrived? Is that the point that the bus stops? Is that the point that the driver kind of puts the brake on? Is that the moments that you step off the bus? If you really look at it, we see that it's almost like 0 second because we can't really say like at what exact point we got to that destination. And even if we, put a point on it, it's basically 0 second. So if we remove the journey, you're just gonna end up with some snapshots of life within the specific scenarios and circumstances. And we kind of sacrifice all that life for specific snapshots that we basically got to that destinations. So the entire value and entire um, um, the entire value of the life is basically sabotaged or skipped as a result of this desire to kind of skip the journey. So in that way, the entire life becomes the combination of the destinations and the journey. And the majority of that is actually the journey, because if we consider the destinations are 0 second, then everything that is left is the journey. So it is extremely important to really have an understanding of this, because in that way, how we relate to the journey, it really changes. And that shift of perspective is really important, because the way that we regard each moment becomes different. Instead of wishing that to pass by so we get to that destination or that goal, we recognize the value of life and recognize the value of that moment, recognizing that every moment is what gives definition to the life. And through these moments, the entire life is formed. So this type of programming is one of the examples of how we program our worldview, and how we relate to the external circumstances of life and in life in general, the journey, the destinations. And also imagine the person that is always waiting to get to the destination. They're not even able to enjoy the journey. The entire journey, they're dealing with opposition, antagonism, spasm, maybe anger or frustration, or a lot of negative emotions, because they just want to get to that destination and they're not really enjoying the journey. So it's really affecting the quality of individuals' experience throughout the journey, which basically is throughout the life as well. So in general, considering the fact that humans are in every moment they're setting specific goals, and as soon as they're set, they just set their eye gaze on that and they want to get there, and they no longer are interested in the journey. And um, if they can, they would sacrifice some of the time to just get there as fast as possible. So with such a way, they can't again enjoy the journey and gain the experience and learn what we could learn, use the most optimal level, um, use the optimal level of information that we should access by paying attention what is around us and really looking deeper into what is the book of existence, and what does it have to tell us about the existence, and not sacrificing the um, journey and those knowledge and the purpose of the journey for those specific sets of goals that usually are uh, regarding earthly affairs or related to materialistic aspects of existence, more like a survival aspects rather than um, other aspects that are deeper and more important fundamentally. So, such individuals that really focus on achieving their goals, skipping the journey, getting to the destination, are the ones who would basically observe their life passing by very quickly and look back and kind of like saying like they don't know what happened and how fast the life passed by, and the they might not be actually aware that they were wishing for it, wishing for that to pass by very quickly, and they were just thinking about the destinations that they wanted to get at, and um, consequently, the lifespan was just passed by very, very quickly. You hear a lot, people would say, like, oh, I wish that this week would pass by as well, or this month would pass by, or this year would pass by. So this event could happen and we're already there. Or as I said, like there are so many different reasons that people could say, like, I wish that, one more year and then I'm done with school, one more year and I'm done with mortgage, and I have financial independence, one more year and then I see I'm married, or things like that. Everything that comes as a destination or a goal that we want to get there faster. And again, that becomes at the cost of sacrificing the life for some snapshots and some moments that pass by very quickly. So there are two aspects, two questions, or two objections that kind of eats people from within. That one is like, um, when would something be possible? Or what if? And these two type of questions, or questions as such, it kind of eats people from within, and it doesn't really let them enjoy the journey because they're kind of being eaten by the um, antagonism and opposition, or the uh, urge to sacrifice the moments to get to that result or that destination or that goal. And those basically steal the journey from the individuals and take away their life journey from them. And again, another aspect of that is that it causes a lot of stress, causes a lot of tension, spasms, and consequently it poisons the body in different ways. It can cause all sorts of psychosomatic and mental-somatic illnesses as a result, and it that even pushes us closer to the end of life, and its least amount of quality that it could be. So in such a way, the more, like, kind of putting it bluntly, the humans become the time killers, and they're constantly trying to kill time so they get to their destinations or their goal. And one of the aspects that would testify against us in afterlife is actually time. And there's a reference in Quran, Wal Asr, Innal Insana Lafi Khusr, which basically it talks about how humans are killing time and they cause wrong to themselves because of that. Uh, a, a wrong deed that is irreversible, and they basically sacrificing the only thing that they have in hand in this life, which is time and the moments in life. So this life and its moments and the time is the only investments that we have, is the only thing that we have in hand, and it's ever decreasing as we go forward. So it's important for us to see the value and appreciate it every moment, and really use every moment for uh, the highest purpose. Now, another aspects that we mentioned, but I want to emphasize on that these kind of objections and oppositions to the journey can um, cause all sorts of issues. As I said, illnesses and disorders. And if the individuals are not peaceful with the journey and want the journey themselves, then it can cause this all sorts of problems. This restlessness, despair, spasms, tension, being nervous or angry or agitated, and kind of bottling up all sorts of emotions. And this would result production of negative potential energy, as well as the chemicals within the body that would poison the body and causing all sorts of illness and disorders. So it is extremely important for human beings to realize that the journey is very important and valuable, and we need to be aligned with the journey itself, and we need to enjoy it. And we should not really ever want it to be done or skip it, because basically that implies we want death. We want death to get closer and death to come faster. So, by understanding that the journey and getting to the destination are important aspects of the life, but one should not be sacrificed for the other. And by focusing only on the destinations, we are basically focusing on getting to death faster in a way. And we would look back at some point and realize that we um, didn't utilize the journey and the life, the moments that we had at best. Now, we refer to that verse, وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ. It has a second part which says that الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. And we want to talk about عَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, which basically are the acts. So I'm going to break it down because it's very important. Amelo is basically the actions, and salihat is the root of the word is saleh, which also the root of it is sol, which basically means that it's a erphonic stage or status to get to a state, to get to in which the individuals achieve the highest levels of peace with all the aspects of existence. So and then the first part of it is the actions. So any actions in which that helps individuals to get to the state of ultimate peace. And these the peace is with all the aspects of existence is extremely important. If you remember in second course, we talked about peace with all the aspects of existence, and we broke it down to peace with God, peace with universe, ourselves, and others, and um, also other aspects, different aspects of existence could be the existence itself as well as time. So the lack of recognition, understanding, and understanding of the state of being Saleh, which basically is that ultimate peace, being the states of ultimate peace, um, it can cause all sorts of issues as well. And we want to look into these aspects in a deeper way. So again, peace has a very clear definitions for individuals generally, but for that specific phrase that I mentioned, a reference from Quran, the general public interpretation of that phrase is not what Dr. Taheri decoded in Erfan Halgheh. And the common understanding is just doing some good deeds and having some good actions, let's say, like serving others, things like that. So the general understanding is actually nothing to do with the piece itself, but rather doing some good deeds about others, mostly like the acts of service, as I mentioned. But here we actually, Dr. Tari decodes it as the Saleh is actually the Irfanic state of peace. And that's not something that one can achieve merely relying on doing acts like good deeds. And it is in a state, is a quality state that it's achieved through understanding of such understanding that would cause and result peace with God, with existence, with ourselves and the others. So the individuals that is saleh, it means that they are in peace with God, all the aspects of existence, with themselves and others, and there's no oppositions to anything whatsoever in existence. So, in that way, their thoughts, their actions, their speech, everything to do with them is aligned with that and is based on that inner peace. And that can also translate externally. So, in another word, the actions of Saleh are all the actions that would get the individuals to closer to that state of peace. And this individual that is Saleh is one that is in this state of peace and ultimate levels of peace, which basically means that he accomplished the ability to resolve all the antagonism and opposition within himself and be free from this conflict, existential conflict or internal conflict. So in the journey of Kamal, from going um, from the ordinary operation to more sublime operation, the journey that ordinary individuals take to go toward Kamal, there are a lot of um, factors that cause opposition and antagonism, and those act like a brick, and it can stop and delay individuals' um, journey toward Kamal. But for the individuals that got to the state of Saleh, ultimate peace, these breaks or internal breaks that would interfere with the sublime emotion towards sublimity would not be present, and the individual's mental energy would not be directed toward these factors that causes opposition and antagonism. And in this way, we could say that from this perspective, we could say that the this is status or stage of Saleh is one of the highest levels in which one can achieve in this life. And when someone, on the contrary, is involved or wrestling with opposition, it interferes with the integration of their existence, and that causes the productions of chemicals by brain and hormones by brain that poisons the body. And again, we established already the understanding that the opposition and antagonism poisons the body, and it endangers our health and compromises our inner peace. So consequently, one of the factors in which that can cause illness and disorder among humans is the conflicts, oppositions, and antagonism within themselves that uh, basically is the lack of being saleh, being in the state of ultimate peace. And it is important to note that achieving such a Erfanic status or state um, would resolve any conflict or opposition antagonism within human beings, and it would not cause them to the being in a state of peace doesn't cause them to be um, indifferent or non-caring toward injustice. So even though that they are in peace, it doesn't mean that anyone can walk over them or do anything and they're just in peace and they don't say nothing. In fact, they are in a state of peace, but if they need to fight or stand against injustice, they do so by remaining while remaining in the state of peace. So if they need to fight, they will fight, but they're in a state in the peace. If they need to stand against tyranny um, and defend, they will, but in the state of peace. So it is very intricate and important quality to think about. If someone's fighting the enemy, let's say they're fighting the um, uh, occupation, the occupying of, let's say, um, someone's attacking to get the country, and one need to protect their family and their country. So they need to fight back and they need to shoot guns and everything. But the quality in which that they're operating in the moment is not in antagonism and hate toward the opposition, because again we established our understanding that everything is the aspects and face of an image of God. So the person that reaches to this state, they are able to actually look at their enemy in the state of peace while they're defending and standing against that tyranny. So it is very intricate and important quality. As you can imagine, is incredible to think about um, such quality. And you can even see such quality, for example, in some historical figures like Jesus, that he was crucified and then they were basically um, hurting him as he was being crucified, and then he was praying for them and talking to God, that asking God's forgiveness because they're ignorant and they don't know what they're doing. So that's such a state that sees the face of beloved, and the state of peace in such a challenging times is that status of being saleh, which basically doesn't allow individuals to have any type of antagonism with any type of manifestation in the existence. So when we talk about that state, we don't take it lightly. It's an incredible state of Erfanic state to achieve when once one resolve all the antagonism and opposition to every aspects of existence, then the result would be incredible. And that's why it's called one of the highest states and stages in Erfanic journey to achieve. So we talked about the different levels of peace or different categories of peace. We talked about how there are subcategories, and if you would uh, categorize them in the sequence of going from the most easy to the hardest, the first would be the easiest, would be the peace with God, then would be peace with existence, then peace with ourselves, and others. I'm going to break it down how and why each are significant and what are the implication and underlying factors of each. So a lot of the individuals would have antagonism and opposition to the justice and the faith and the wisdom of God in regards to the circumstances of life, because there is an expectation that things to be just in their perspective as they define in the scale of the life that we're living in. And what that means is that as long as uh, the desires of individuals are met and the events of life is going the way the individuals want, then the justice is present. But if not, then they perceive that there is injustice. So if the earthly matters, the things about life is not going the way the individuals want, then suddenly there is injustice because there are other people that things are going their way or the way that in which that they prefer or desire and not them. And these type of oppositions not only would question the God's justice, but also would question the faith, which the divine wisdom, the divine plan of creation, and consequently renders the entire creations as redundant. And this is considering the fact that the justice of God is present through the natural laws for every particles in existing in existence, and the divine wisdom and the faith is being executed in a very just way, in a very um, principled way, and one of them being the law of reflection. And based off these laws, this law, individuals would receive what they're enthusiastic about, and whether their desires are toward positive or negative, they were they would receive that accordingly. So by the recognition of the law of reflection, we can say that, and then in the way that is being implemented and executed, we can really become aware of the divine wisdom and the faith that exists, um and also, which basically results to understanding the existence of divine justice and understanding that everything is created for a purpose and has a role, and it is partaking um, on the implementations of divine wisdom of God and the divine plan of creations, because the way in which that people um, come uh, kind of end up on each other's way and kind of bump into each other, this apparent um, coincidental encounters are actually, in fact, not coincidental, and they're all corresponding with the natural law and the law of reflection based on individuals' enthusiasm and what they're seeking. So individuals become each other's um, test and uh, challenging figures and um, kind of causing circumstances that individuals would be tested in different ways. So if individuals would not have correct understanding of the divine wisdom and divine design of creations and the law of reflections, they're not really able to actually have a correct analysis about the events in life. And they would encounter phenomena, incidents, and circumstances that it might appear as oppositional um, to what is good for them, and they might develop a lot of questions and antagonism with God. But if they have an understanding of how the natural laws work and uh, how the natural laws working in accordance to the divine design, then many of those objections would be resolved and things would make sense. Another reason that could cause individuals to develop oppositions and antagonism toward God is the lack of recognition, understanding, and understanding of the philosophy of acts of worship. And we talked about this before, the way in which individuals approach that concept, like worshiping God and praying, they kind of might think like praying and worshiping is kind of a transaction that they can do with God and expect something in return. And if they do it and then they don't receive what they want, and then they start like developing oppositions to God and saying like no matter what they do or they tried hard, they give what God wanted, but they didn't receive what they wanted. And then they kind of like develop an oppositions and antagonism toward God because of that. But we really established understanding that prayer and worships is it should be a mere consequence of an inner longing and inner ishq and unconditional love for for internal transformation, for alignment and spiritual sublimity, not a kind of mean to have a transactions with God to achieve something on an earthly level that would resolve some sort of a uh, earthly desire or need. So each of these rituals or ceremonies, we know that it only would have a value if there is a connections with God. And through this connection is that the prayer and the worship would get to its result. Because it is only in such way that humans could uh, deliver that ishq and be the host of that and then embody the true status and the role in the entire existence. And um, it is because of that ishq that all this existence came to creation. And um, it's through that type of operation, ishq based operation, whether that's in day-to-day life or whether it's an act of worship, that it causes the individuals to actually follow the act of worship on that ultimate optimal state, rather than kind of approaching it in a transactional sense and expecting something in return, which we know that things on a natural law doesn't work that way. So they would feel after they feel desperate and develop antagonism to God because they thought they think like they've done their part or they done what they could do, but nothing was coming from the other end, and maybe God doesn't love them or doesn't listen to them or doesn't care about them and things like that. We also emphasize the fact that this relationship that comes from Ishq and the approach that it should be toward acts of worship is with the aligned worldview of um, no expectation. So we talked about there's this Erfanic state of uh, no expectation state, and in a state in which that person wouldn't really not asking anything in return, and they're not looking at this acts of worships as a transactional, and um, therefore would not cause them any um, they don't feel entitled to receive anything in return, but it's just for expressing the love, the longing, and then that appreciation and gratefulness um, that they actually approach the act of worship. So in general, to conclude, um, it is important to develop a worldview that uh, is aligned with the natural law, and we kind of looking at how the lack of alignment with natural law can result a faulty worldview that can result an opposition and antagonism that follows by illnesses, disorders, and many other issues. And on the other hand, we also emphasize that act of worship is one of the definitions that we define, Dr. Taheri quoted again in Erfan Halgheh, that the definition of act of worship is actually fulfilling the mission of servitude that would cause sublimity. And if someone achieved that understanding, not only um, they are not developing antagonism as a result of the act of worship, but also would be filled with this ishq that make them want to do that act of worship more and more. So that should be the consequence of the act of worship, not uh, opposition to God. So the different types of oppositions with God, we kind of gave examples of that, and throughout the journey toward Kamal, and by having experiences, understanding that relates to this step of Ishq, these oppositions would be resolved, and individuals can achieve the internal peace with the with God. And it is very important to also note that one of the most beautiful and highest levels of peace with God is the understanding of An al Haq, which basically is I'm the truth and I'm the God, is that being one with God in such a state that the one walks with God and walks with the presence of God, like carrying and moving with God. And that's one of the highest level and most beautiful levels that one can achieve uh, in the resolution of this inner peace with God. The second piece, which we mentioned, was the peace with existence. And we mentioned that if there is the lack of recognition, understanding, and understanding of the laws in which that the existence is governed by, then the individuals would develop an antagonism and oppositions with existence. And what we mean by existence, as is self-explanatory, is everything that exists. So it's the combinations of uh, all the aspects that exist individually and all that to coming together. It kind of makes all the entire collections of um, existing phenomena that all are the divine manifestations of God, and they're also containing the essence of God. So when we look at it in such a way, when we say existence, we can really only define it as the manifestations of God. And when we talk about the existence here, we are directly referring to all the manifestations of God. So peace with existence has two different transformations. One is that it emphasizes on the significance of each part of the existence is containing God, is equally valuable, and they're all um, have this quality that, if you remember, we talked about how and seeing every aspect as a face of beloved and image of God. And the second is that the individuals get to the understanding that they should not really enforce their personal desire to any aspects of existence, including the universe and time. And if individuals get to such a state, they get to such a peace that they uh, are basically experiencing cosmic Hamfazi and also another Hamfazi, which is with time. So, which is for future courses. So, individuals, human beings, are also part of this existence, that if they are aligned and harmonious and hamfaz with all the other aspects of existence, then it results optimal operation. And if they're not hamfas with other aspects of existence or in peace with other aspects of existence, they encounter all sorts of psyche, mental, and physical damages, and that affects their lifespan. So it is very important to understand this relationship. And also, it is important to understand that if someone has this hamfazi, this one being one with, being synchronized with, being harmonized uh, with all the aspects of existence, they can achieve a quality state that um, it causes immunity for individuals. And one of the highest level of immunity is immunity achieved through ishq, unconditional love. If one has have this unconditional love and this inner peace and alignment and all with all the aspects of existence, they get to immunity that even if they encounter illnesses and like viruses as microorganisms as such, the dangers are not detrimental for them. And this goes back to a notion that Dr. Taheri talks about, which is the relationship, is an intelligent relationship between the microorganisms that can cause illnesses and disorders with individuals, and those relationships are very different. And there are individuals that actually can go through pandemics or um, waves of illnesses and disorders and come out healthy with no problem. And those are among the people that actually have the highest levels of peace with external world, and they are less concerned about the contamination or getting sick and etc. And we can see that even in like observing children that are born and grown up in villages comparing to the cities. In villages, they hang out in dust with animals, they're just kind of like very exposed to nature, nothing sanitary like city. And we see that this in the city, the children, like the parents, try to keep everything sanitized, keep them away from any exposures that could potentially make them sick. And then we really look at the statistics that there are higher levels of sickness and illnesses among people, children living in the cities comparing to living in the villages in those conditions that they're basically exposed to all sorts of microorganisms and with animals and all that. And that's basically as a result of this T-consciousness emission that it comes as a result of parents' thoughts and educations and how the children themselves relate to nature and natural laws in such a way, and that opposition that they have with, like, let's say microorganisms and etc., that can make them more vulnerable actually, um, when exposed to them. So on the contrary, we see that the children that they're really exposed to nature and they're not being told that this is bad, or like being concerned or try to remove um, and isolate them from the exposure, we see that they're actually more resilient once they're exposed. The next piece is a piece with um, ourself, and is the other piece that is very important throughout our journey. And when individuals achieve the peace with the self, they get to the they become aware of their true status in the existence and become self-aware. And in order for us to understand this different types of antagonism with the self better, we gonna look into some subcategories. There's some fundamental. The first one is the fundamental oppositions or antagonism, which is basically um, is a main fundamental um, is a main basis for the self opposition and any other type of oppositions that um, is coming from the dual nature of our existence that actually give us the ability to be tested and also have growth. So each human being has two different type of inclination within themselves, which is camel orientation and anti-camel orientation, and they will exist always in our existence, and they will exist. And if they're not, if the anti-camel inclinations are not controlled and managed, uh, these internal factors of anti-camel would remain active, and the inner peace would not happen. So, in circumstances that uh, humans cannot determine between good and evil, and for this reason, they kind of get to the state of despair. And also, basically, when they want to make a choice, they get really agitated and um, really stressed. And also, when they don't get the best results that they want as a result of their choices, they also develop self-antagonism and opposition. So there are some various different type of um, elementary opposition, which is um, there are three different types, um, which basically relates to, let me see if I have, yes, I have the chart here. There are different type of oppositions that is related to a software, a very fundamental software of ourselves. We study this in depth in Cosmointology. It's the software of Bonyad. And one is superiority seeking, one is affection seeking, and one is solitude seeking. And these are like primary oppositions. One um, and the difference between these have manifests itself in a different way among children, and we can see that very early on as well. These are the type of operation that is born with us from the beginning. We have it, and then we can even observe it in children when they are basically playing with each other, and each come with this sets of attributes. One, so in order of sequence from superiority to affection and solitude seeking. Um, So for the superiority seeking are more like attacking type of behavior. You see the kids kind of steal other people's toys and kind of bully them, things like that. Um, it is the um, affection seeking is where the individuals have more like try to keep everyone happy, or um, they want to get attention, and if they don't, then they get bothered by it. And the solitude seeking is that they really want to avoid any challenging circumstances or anything that could disturb them. And with the smallest disturbance, they get really agitated, and their inner stability is disturbed. So for the first one, the superiority, if their efforts to be superior over others is not achieved, then they get negatively impacted by it. So they feel like loss. And the weakness part of the affection seekers are they want to always seek the attentions of others. And so if someone doesn't give them attentions, they in this it significantly affect them in a negative way. Um, and These type of operations are obviously not optimal, and the healthy characteristic would be one that is balanced between all these in a healthy way. So the ma'rifat, the divine knowledge and awareness, and hamfazi, the cosmic hamfazi, um, and also the correction of the worldview with help to balance these type of imbalances. There's also a Halgheh that later on we received that it helps balancing them specifically. There's another opposition that exists, which is the opposition between the actions and thoughts. If there is the opposition between an actions of thoughts, uh, if it's present, then it can um, the least damage that it can have is the inner tension that develops over time for the individuals and would result psychosomatic illnesses. One of these types of um, oppositions between the actions and thoughts are those dual behaviors that we discussed in second course, and we had a Halgheh for it. Another opposition is the opposition between the executor me and the ideal self. So executor self and ideal self. The individuals that have a big difference, a big distance between their actual self and ideal self. So every individuals have an ideal version of themselves, and if they see the gap between themselves and that ideal self, and this gap increases so much that it causes tension and stress, sometimes as a response of that stress, the psychological defense mechanism get involved with that process and cut the tie between these between the mind and the ideal, the actual self, and the person's actually consider themselves already in their ideal self. And that's kind of like a states of insanity. You can see, observe some individuals in mental hospitals that they kind of consider themselves, let's say, the king of the world or the commander of a or a chief or something like that, or like even someone can claim that they're messiah or things like that. So that's again as a result of the stress and anxiety developed as a result of the gap between the actual self and an ideal self, so much so that the person can't stand. So, in order for the psychological defense mechanism to neutralize that, it just cuts the ties between the actual self with the mind, and then that causes the individuals to uh, perceive themselves as already that ideal self that doesn't correspond their actions and um, their actions and their actions doesn't correspond with what they're claiming. There are also other types of oppositions, kind of day-to-day oppositions like political, economical, um, sociological, cultural, that individuals can develop in oppositions to any of these categories, and that disturbs their inner stability and peace, and that also causes oppositions toward the self. The last one, but not the least, and actually the most difficult type of opposition to be resolved is the oppositions with others. As we mentioned, oppositions with God resolves the fastest by understanding some notions about God's justice, the design of creations, the whyness and howness of that. Um, it can resolve quite easy and quite fast. And then after that, we have the oppositions to existence. That also by understanding some natural laws, changing the worldview, having some understandings and experiences through Halghehs, and familiarizing ourselves in the quality level, that would be also resolved. And also the opposition toward ourselves, even though that is hard, but it can be resolved through understanding some of these aspects that we mentioned and accepting the fact that the important as the important factor is that we are in the journey, and then we will always see the distance between ourselves and our ideal self, and it becomes humbling, especially when we set our quality very high, and wanting to achieve those high qualities, the distance between ourselves and ideal selves increases, and that can cause oppositions with the self and becomes more difficult. But it is very important to always remind ourselves that we are in a journey, and this journey is a difficult journey. and it actually addresses the philosophy of existence. And we also facing a lot of oppositions on the other hand as a result of the equal opposite resistant force that doesn't want us to just easily get to those optimal levels of uh, states of operation. And we also want to recognize that we have connections to God, and then we have God's hand behind us using the Halghehs. This is facilitated. This journey is became much easier um, with the existence of these already established connections that we can use. So the important aspects is that we are in the journey, and then the journey, uh, if we persist and be consistent, we will get there by the help of Halghehs and help of God. So those type of oppositions to the self can also be resolved. Now, one of the hardest oppositions is opposition to others, because it is very difficult to, if you think about it, I don't think I need to really explain it to, there's so many aspects of evil can be embodied through other people, and we have very extreme examples in the history that we know how um, humans are capable of evil and how they embody it in various ways. So that makes it very difficult be to resolve the oppositions with others and accept as they are and see the face of beloved in them, even though that they're manifesting evil. Um, but again, that doesn't mean that by being in peace with these aspects doesn't mean that we should be agreeing with their operations or supporting their operations, but rather it is our responsibility to stand against justice, and standing against injustice is obligation and is a duty of a person that walks the journey of Kamal and is in the Erfanic path. Because if we allow the tyranny to exist, then we are participating uh, with that. If we don't stand against it, we're participating of its existence. Therefore, we're supporting that in an indirect way. So it is extremely important to understand these subtleties. I kind of talked and I kind of like talked and passed by skimming through the notions. These are really intricate, deep notions that we discuss, and kind of like I went over them. We elaborate more and more as we go further, but I really encourage individuals to reach out and ask questions to um, create a space for me to elaborate if it's necessary, as these are very intricate and deep notions, and they're very, very fundamental and important. And if it is well established, then it helps us much more to go and be on the journey. So I always also emphasize on using cosmic Hanfazi Halghe. Dr. Tari always suggests that it's not enough of that, as it addresses various different levels of our existence and oppositions and peace and experiences that are very necessary for us to develop that quality that we are aiming, that would result that transformation. So with that, we completed the theoretical material of this session. The floor is open for questions. If you'd like to ask any questions, I'm here. If not, I wish you a great night and see you next week. As always, we're gonna have like a 15 minutes at this all before we go. So I'm gonna let everyone to ask questions before we go to the Etisal and come back for reports and questions. Any questions? No questions. Okay. Well, thank you for noting the time. So one question is a state of Saleh comparable to enlightenment? Well, enlightenment is a very general um, kind of notion when it comes to describing what type of consequences that has, because enlightenment is it contains a lot of different experiences that it could or could not resolve in the state of Saleh. The state of Saleh, basically, throughout the course, we define various different states in an Erfanic journey. And those are all different aspects of enlightenment or enlightenment journey. Is the enlightenment is a consequence, I almost can say like, is the process in which one would achieve an state or or achieving that state, but it's not really well defined what state, because there are infinite states that we can achieve that would result resolving and harmonious operation in one of the infinite aspects of existence. So Saleh is very specific, focusing on the ultimate peace. Enlightenment could resolve being this in a state of being untouchable, uh, ultimate control of the emotions, ultimate control of the mind. These are all the consequence of enlightenment in various different ways, if that makes sense. Good question. Any other questions? Okay, so let's go for 15 minutes at the cell. We will be back for reports and if there are any questions. Thank you.